I'm a huge fan of the underdog. I'm somebody that I will outwork you. When I look at a lot of the people that I've had these conversations with, there's a lot of traits they had in common. And that big one is they're willing to outwork people. You go from being good, but to being great from the actual mental side of things and the hard work. It's not just talent that's going to take you to that next level. If something is happening economically, how can you as a business owner do something about it to use that motion? People that are extraordinary are willing to go up against impossible odds and face them, right? They're willing to confront that. Are you going to win every time? No, but it's...
Ever feel like you're shouting into the void with your big ideas and nobody is actually listening? What if I told you the secret to impact isn't shouting louder, it's showing up smarter? Meet Jeremy Ryan Slate, author, CEO of Command Your Brand, and host of the hit Jeremy Ryan Slate Show. He went from studying ancient religions to becoming a modern master of influence. Today, he's showing you how to command attention, grow your platform, and turn your story into an unstoppable impact. If you've ever dreamed of being extraordinary, you're in the right place, and this one is for you. Welcome, Jeremy Ryan.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I appreciate hanging out here. And I will just say for your audience that you are such a graceful person, because my technology was not cooperating today. And you had the patience to be willing to put up with me trying to figure it out. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, your path is anything but typical. From studying theology and Roman emperor worship to hosting a top-rated podcast and leading a media PR agency. Wow, totally different, totally different. What inspired this pivot into personal branding and media influence?
So for me, the path definitely was not a straightforward one, honestly. As you mentioned, I was kind of the ultimate nerd. My undergrad degree is in Catholic theology and world religions, and in between grad school and undergrad, I studied at New College, Oxford, and then I got my master's in Roman emperor worship. So for me, I thought hey, I'm going to be a college professor. That's what I'm going to end up doing. And I applied to one school, which is NYU. I ended up not getting into that school, and I guess apparently I didn't want to do it that bad because I didn't really push that hard to go out and find the right kind of career. So I ended up teaching at a private school for a couple years out of school. And it was hard because you work a lot of hours, you don't make a ton of money, and I wasn't super happy. And in 2013, my mom ended up having a really bad stroke, and it made me look at so many different things in my life. Do I want to be doing this? Could I see myself doing this forever? If I'm making the impact I feel like I should be making? And so I quit my job on a total whim, and I did so many different things. I did network marketing. I sold life insurance. I did online marketing. I ended up finally working at a friend's company building websites, which I taught myself to do from watching YouTube videos and reading blogs. And I started a podcast purely as a hobby. This is back in 2014. And I had been a listener for a really long time. And we had 10,000 listens in our first month, which shocked me because I'm nobody, right? I'm not famous. I'm not well known. But I was willing to, in that point in time, if I was going to fail, at least fail giving it my all. And we had a lot of motion early on, and it put us in the podcasting world and what we do here at Command Your Brand.
Such an interesting story. I love it.
Ready to lead smarter and invest wiser? On the Executive Connect podcast, we unpack executive strategies for wealth and influence. Hit the subscribe button now. Don't just watch, act.
Now, talk to me a little bit about how those early days in academia has helped you today and really how you're showing up and leading with what you do.
Well, I think the biggest part about it is, number one, and it's funny because I got a chance to interview my favorite historian a couple weeks ago, which was the coolest experience ever, by the way, Dr. Adrian Goldsworthy. And I was saying the coolest thing about his work is when you read his history, you learn a lot about people, right? I think most history, they're boring, this happened, that happened, whatever the dateline might be. But he talks a lot about people, right? Meaning, if you look at a Julius Caesar, for example, you look at his life experiences or what he was going through or owing money to someone else. So he makes a lot of decisions in his life based on those things. And I think when we learn a lot of history, we don't really get that perspective, right? We don't get the idea of people being people, right? They're composites of all these different things. They're kind of just cogs in a wheel when you read history books. So to me, looking at interviews, number one, I started to see the composites that are people, because this is something I've always been interested in. It's also been interesting for running a team, right? Because you understand the things happening in their life, what's going on, what the different things you could solve or might need to handle, or what could come up. But I think so often people look at that situation, they say, well, this person isn't doing their job, or it's just not working out. You forget that the person is a composite of all these different things and all these different factors. And I think, to me, that's the thing I've really looked at for history, is I've always been someone interested in historical characters and what makes them who they are. A really good example is I read a book a number of years ago called So You Think You Know the Civil War. And it gives the story of General Stonewall Jackson, who is one of the strangest human beings you ever learned about. He had to ride upright on his horse because he thought his internal organs always had to be in exact alignment. He chewed on lemon rinds and had a high-pitched voice. Well, that makes you look at a lot of the things that happen in his life very differently. And I think when you understand that, you have a lot of perspective in life.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much to that to unpack, but there are so many different pieces and layers of all of us, right?
Sure.
And they make us kind of who we are and how we experience the world today. And I'm somebody who believes that all of us has a maverick inside of us and that all of us are extraordinary. But you literally wrote a book about unremarkable to extraordinary. So I'll have to get your insights here, but what patterns have you seen among the highest performers you've interviewed, and how everyday leaders can start applying those insights to level up themselves and their careers?
Well, I don't know about you, Melissa, but I'm a huge fan of the underdog, right? Like, I like somebody that didn't start on top, that started out probably with a huge problem in their life or a huge disadvantage. So I'm somebody that I will outwork you, right? I will work harder than you because and that's not to say you in general, I'm just saying the individual person. I will outwork someone else. And when I look at a lot of the people that I've had these conversations with, for unremarkable to extraordinary, there's a lot of traits they had in common. And that big one is they're willing to outwork people. There's one of my favorite stories. I'm a huge Yankee fan. And in 2009, when the Yankees won the World Series, they had a player on that team that was one of my favorite players, a guy named Nick Swisher. And Nick Swisher was somebody that, out of high school, his dad was a former professional baseball player. He played, I think, for the St. Louis Cardinals. But anyway, he expected he was going to be drafted in the first round out of high school, because if you're really good at baseball, that's what happens. The draft comes and nobody called him. He was shocked. So he ends up going to Ohio State University, puts in as much work as you can imagine, and 4 years later, he is drafted in the first round by the Oakland Athletics. So to me, I think if you're willing to put in the work, there is an ability to close the gap that other people that are just talented are leaving behind, right? I think so many people get to a certain point on talent. I think professional sports is a great example of this. But you go from being good but to being great from the actual mental side of things and the hard work. It's not just talent that's going to take you to that next level. So that's one of the biggest things. But also courage, I think, is another thing as well. So many times we're all going to face difficult things in our life. And when all these conversations I've had, I've seen that people that are extraordinary are willing to go up against impossible odds and face them, right? They're willing to confront that. And are you going to win every time? No. But it's going to teach you a lot about yourself. And at the same time, you're going to come out of the other side of that experience better than what you went in. So to me, I know there's so many other things I could say about this, but those are two characteristics that I think every single person out there listening could put into their life, is be willing to confront and experience anything with the perspective that you're going to come out the other side in some way, shape, or form better. And then the other thing I would say is be willing to outwork others that might be more talented than you.
Yeah, I love that. That's such good advice. So many things are popping into my head when you're talking about that. I got that advice really, really young from a man that I babysat with, interestingly enough. And he always just said, Melissa, just do 1% more every day for other people, 1%. And I literally took that Like I heard that wrong. So I just figured if I could do 10% more for everyone, being an overachiever and all, I figured I would up it to 10 versus one. But, I think there's so much truth to that
Sure.
just outworking. I look at people that have pivoted in their careers, knew nothing about an industry, and now they're the top of their game. I have friends that know nothing about technology or cybersecurity and started a cybersecurity company. They're,
Hmm.
educators that got into cybersecurity. So there's so much to be said about what you said, to work
Hmm.
hard and enjoy what you do while you're doing it. I think is another one I hear a lot. I want to talk to
Well,
you.
can I add one thing to that, Melissa, too? Because I think at the same
Yes.
time, bad things happen to people, right? They do, right? And I'm not going to say that they don't, but I think for a lot of people, you have to learn how to use that motion. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to learn how to use that motion of that bad thing that might have happened to you, because you can use that as strength or courage or encouragement or the ability to build a skill maybe someone else doesn't have. I interviewed the founder of My Pillow, Mike Lindell, a number of years ago, and he's telling this story about this terrible drug addiction he had, and that it actually helped him to build the strength to go through a number of years without making any money in business to be able to do what he has to do, right? So there is the ability of getting hit with some of these things and saying, okay, well, how can I use this motion, right? Because something bad might have happened to you, right? You might have had a bad experience in your life or dealt with addiction or whatever it might be, but there's an ability to use that motion if you can say, okay, how can I use this to redirect my life in a different way?
This episode is brought to you by Summit Ventures. If you're an accredited investor, Summit gives you access to one of the greatest tax advantage opportunities: direct ownership in oil and gas. Their projects deliver what they call the triple play: cash flow, equity growth, and powerful tax benefits. And here's the best part: these investments qualify for 1031 exchanges. That means you can roll gains from real estate into energy while deferring capital gains. To learn more and get a free white paper, Oil and Gas Demystified, just visit www.summitven.com/executive connect.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up. So first of all, thank you. Second of all, I think it's interesting because we have a choice, right, in our
Mm-hmm.
life. Like this bad thing happened. We were fired from a job. We were partnered with somebody and they took all of our money, or whatever the situation is. We
I've
have a
been there,
choice.
by the way.
Yes, ditto, right? So we have a choice, right? We can show up victim
Mm-hmm.
and the world's over, it's ending, I'm never going to find another job. Or we can take that struggle and turn it into a strength and pivot. And I think back, I forget who said this quote, but it's, sometimes we get pulled back and 10 steps back to go one step forward. But like you said at the beginning, it's the hard work that's going to get you over that hill,
Mm-hmm.
and to continue to do it and to not give up and to take what's happened to us and learn from it and iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. So I think it's very interesting. Now, I want to talk with you about, man, media is so tricky right
Yeah.
now. I feel like the minute that we figure it out on LinkedIn, the algorithm changes. So
Yeah.
the media landscape is like so crazy and chaotic right now, with so many people competing with intentions or expectations or what's going on in our political world.
Mm-hmm.
What are the most powerful ways that leaders can cut through the noise and grow their brand and get attention?
Well, honestly, I think it's by what we're doing right now, and that's having conversations on podcasts and on YouTube and things such as that, because the media landscape is just changing so much, right? Like if you look at, I'm going to go back to 20 years ago when I was in high school, right? You look at the way things were then. People watch shows at a certain time. I remember, I don't know if you've watched Friends, but I've watched the whole series through like 4 times. And when that series originally came out, everybody waited for those episodes to come out. And that's how television was. It was the idea of appointment only viewing. The show was on once, and then you have to wait for it, and hopefully it came out on DVD or VHS, and you would watch it later on. The way our media landscape is now, and this is driven by things like Netflix and Prime and Apple TV and also the podcast world, is users are watching things on demand. They're watching things when they want to watch them. And here's what's interesting about that is you're seeing audience sizes overall get reduced, right? Because they're getting distributed out further into other channels in terms of you're not having one person watch CBS News the way you would have them watch them. You're having that same group of people watch 10 different shows. So you're having a distribution of audience is one part of it. But the other part of it is people are making a real decision to listen to you, right? They're deciding that I'm going to take this time and I'm going to listen to you and dedicate it to this show. So it's a real active listening decision, as opposed to before, people might be listening to a certain radio station in the car because that's their only option, or they might be watching that certain show because that's the only option there is at the time. So the user or the person listening is now the person in control. So I think that's one part, is you're getting an audience that's very interested in what you have to say. But what that means is you have to get clearer at your message and have abilities to have conversations. I think that's a really big part of it, because this is a conversation-driven media. So you have to be able to understand how to get your message out there, who your message communicates to, and then what action you want people to take at the end. That is one of the number one places I see people go wrong, frankly, is not knowing the action they want somebody to take in the end. You'll hear this on a podcast or on a YouTube show or whatever it might be. When somebody gets to the end, they give somebody 25 different places for someone to find them, right? My website is this, my email address is this, my grandmother's cell phone number is this, rather than figuring out what is the one place I can send somebody that brings someone into my ecosystem. And when you think about that, you have to understand that education itself, since this is a learning platform, has two parts of it: the actual theory of it and the application of it, right? You have to apply it. So I always find whatever that call to action is should be something that's a tool, right? Something that's usable. So someone is getting a full understanding of what you're teaching, right? That is a very big part of it. So if you want to get the most out of this media landscape, you also have to understand that the media itself is not the end product. So many people I have a conversation with think it is, right? Like if we're on this show right now, they think that this would be the end product. And when you understand that it's not just the appearance, but also what you do with it, your whole world opens up, because then it becomes things you're using for different ad sets you're putting together. It becomes content pieces for reels, shorts, and other things you're doing on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and things of that nature. And you go from somebody that's being effect of the media that you're on, right? Like it's happening to you, rather than somebody that's effective with it. And that's what I want people to be, effective with the media they're going on. So are you using it in your email marketing? Are you using it in all these different things? When you grasp that, you become unstoppable.
Yeah, and I love where we are by choice right now. I know I grew up where we didn't have cable TV. We had so many channels, and I could not stand the shows that some of my parents watched or my grandparents. I did not want to watch necessarily the news when I was younger. But
Were you
now
like me, where our parents didn't have a remote control, so I was the remote control, and I would have to get up and change the channels for my dad?
The channel. Yeah, that's funny. Okay, I get it now. Okay, but I think about now, like, what I love about media is in where we are right now is I could find information about whatever I want to find it, and I could really control what I'm watching and what goes into my mind. And back growing up, I couldn't. I watched what my parents watched or what they let us watch, and now we can really choose if we want to, watch, drama TV or Disney movies. We can watch leadership podcasts, so we can really control the narrative of what we're putting in our mind and how we want to consume it. As you mentioned, I think that's key, because before we had to watch these shows at these times because that's when they aired, and they weren't replayed until like late night sometimes, and I was asleep late night, so if you didn't get it, you lost it. And so I think it's interesting now. And I know you and your wife, which is so cool that you guys do this together, Command Your Brand, and you guys help entrepreneurs harness whatever it is they're doing in PR, and to use PR as a tool, not just a shiny, flashy thing. So I want to like unpack that a little bit more
Sure.
on how podcasting is so powerful for connection and influence. And then maybe like how you started telling some tips and tricks here. What should leaders avoid doing when they are growing their brand and doing interviews? Like, I know when I hear sometimes people are like negative, 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 negative. And I'm like, okay, what do they do? I don't understand who they are. So maybe you can unpack that and give us the tips and tricks on
Sure.
what they should be doing.
Well, I want to add to what you just said first, because I think you made a really, really good point about the number of choices people have. And I think a really important part about that is understanding that the attention span for you to get attention is very short. So you have to in some way have a differentiator from other people out there. What are you doing differently, right? Because you have a very short period of time to grab someone's attention. So I just wanted to add that because I think it is a really important thing to understand given the number of choices that are out there. In terms of looking to have the biggest effect with your media strategy, I think for a lot of people, they have this idea that they have to go on, let's say it's the biggest podcast out there, right? And for most people, unless you have, like a big idea, for the most part, it's not the right place for most people to be. You want to figure out who's the right public for me to be in front of. Is it CEOs? Is it location independent businesses? Is it people in veterinary practices? Whatever it might be. When you take a look at that, you're taking a look at the niche, right? You want to have a niche celebrity so you can really help people. And I think when you do that, there's one major thing that changes. Several actually, but the one major thing that you should be thinking of is you're now in front of the type of people that could work with you and are ready for your message. So within that, you can then think about who am I communicating to and how am I communicating to them, right? What do they care about? What do they think about? What do they know? And that's going to change the way you have conversations that with a general audience, you wouldn't really do that, right? You would have a much wider range of conversation. Here, it's going to be geared exactly to what those people need. So I think that's the first part, is getting tactical with what kind of shows do I need to be on. Now, there's a lot of great tools out there that you can use. I know Chartable used to be a great one, but rest in peace. They closed up shop a few months ago. But there's tools out there like Raphonic. There's tools like Podchaser. There's a bunch of other ones where you can kind of see what are shows out there, what are possible reaches of them. Because I think far too often when I'm having conversations with new prospective clients, everybody wants to be on Joe Rogan, right? And there's a very small percentage of people that are actually a fit for that. What actually matters is getting in front of their audience. So you have to ask yourself a very important question, and that is this about impact or is this about vanity? And when you take the whole vanity aspect of things out of it and you start looking at impact, well, that's going to change how you're looking and how you're communicating. So I think that's the first part. The second part of it is, I think too often, and you probably get this as much as I do, Melissa, you get these email pitches that aren't really meant for you, they're meant for somebody else. So I think when you're looking at how you're reaching out, you have to understand that there's a lot of different channels you can do it on. And when I've done it personally for myself, I've found that there's certain channels that I'm the strongest on, right? So like I write a lot more on Twitter than I do on Instagram or other places. So that's going to be a place that's really strong for my outreach. So you want to figure out for shows you're targeting, what's going to be the strongest channel for you to reach out to them and build a relationship with them. I think that's another part of it. As well, if you are going to use email pitching, you have to take a look at what's particular to that show. There's too many people that drag and drop the name, and sometimes they forget to change it. I don't know if you've probably gotten emails like I do where they leave the first name, it says first name in parentheses at the beginning of the email. They forgot to change the name. So you really want to take a look at customizing how you're communicating to that podcast. Then once you're on that show, being willing to teach, being willing to help, being willing to really help somebody move forward. So to me, I think that's the best way to really make an impact. Now, I don't think everyone themselves should have a podcast, but I think if you find that this is a medium you love and you enjoy and it's going really well as a guest, well, maybe down the road you do want to start to have your own show. But I don't think that's something most people should have out of the gate. I really think the guesting angle is the correct angle for most people.
Are you someone with a demanding job, but tired of the 9-to-5 grind? What if you could build a profitable side hustle without sacrificing your full-time career? Our new partner, Book Profits, can show you how to turn your limited free time into a thriving online business. Learn how to find, sell, and profit from used books, all on your schedule from the comfort of your own home. Not crazy tech skills needed and no major upfront investment, just simple strategies that fit into your busy lifestyle. Visit the URL on the screen for a free training today and learn more.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because I have received thousands of emails from people at this point, maybe even, I couldn't even tell you. And when they're not thoughtful
Mm-hmm.
and they're very transactional, they don't even get my name right. Been called a bunch of different names besides Melissa. It makes it less interesting for
Mm-hmm.
us that own the podcast to respond. And then the other thing I would say too, I love all those were great. Partner, like part of podcasting and being a guest
Yes.
is give and get. It's not
Yes.
one-sided. I've had some guests on, we do our part to make it beautiful, to curate it, to do our part. And do the other part for the podcasters, give back to them, comment, reshare,
Mm-hmm.
follow their channels, because it's supposed to be a mutually beneficial. And I find when you do that, the ones that have done that for us, I have referred a mountain of referrals to just because
Mm-hmm.
they were good partners. So
Well, that's a
partnering.
really, really important point as well, because like the clients that we have that have done the best in the podcast world are ones that see these conversations in the way, because I think far too often people do a podcast and they think the audience is the audience, right? It's one of your audiences. Another audience is the host, right? How can you do work together? To our clients that have been most successful are ones that have figured out how to do that. I think that's vital. And then your other comment about sharing, well, that goes back to what I was saying before about not being effect of the media, but being effective with the media, right? Because I think people go on the show and they want the show to happen to them. But you also have a responsibility to help the show happen, right? Because that reach that you can add to it is also going to help your own appearance to do better. So it's being effective with the media, not effect of the media.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. I think it's so spot on. I'm curious. We talked a lot about hard work, hustle. I know for me, lifestyle is a big part of my what I love, and I know for you as well, it's a big part of your personal philosophy, whether it's raising chickens or powerlifting. Talk to me a little bit on how you balance your ambitions with intentional living, and what advice would you give to leaders who feel they are stuck in the grind and burnt out?
Well, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask this question, Melissa, because I would say that balance isn't a real thing. And when you're a business owner, you can try as hard as you want. You're never going to achieve balance. It's just you're running a business. That's a big part of it. But I would say being intentional about the things you do in your business. That's a big part of it. So typically, I'll do a lot of keynotes in many different places. I've been to Thailand, I've been to Mexico, and what I tend to do is one of the biggest things I talk to event organizers about is, hey, can we bring my kids on this? They're not going to be in the audience, they're not going to be on stage, but I want them to have the experience of going to all these cool places and doing all these things. So for us as a family, we've really made it work to take our kids on as many experiences as possible. And I think that is really important because there's a lot of kids that don't always see their parents and that don't always get to do things with their parents. But my kids get to do cool stuff because I work. So that's one thing that I've always tried to take a look at is balance isn't really something you're going to get. It just, when you're a business owner, just really, and maybe other people have different opinions on this, but for me, I haven't found it to be a real thing. But what I've found is being intentional with the decisions I make for my business and how I can involve my family in that. I think that is a really important part.
Yeah, and I love that you said that. That is another fantastic nugget. finding the connection between your head and your heart when you're doing things, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I agree with you. I don't believe in balance. I integrate my work life and my personal life, and I have taken my kids places. My son comes when I speak. Although I have had him in the audience, I made the mistake once, and it was kind of cute at the time. In fairness to him, he was about a year and a half old, and he screamed in the back of the room, "That's mommy!"
That happened.
It's,
That's actually the reason that I tend to say that to event organizers, because that happened to me once, where my 6-year-old, when she was like 2, she's like, "My dad's up there. Hi, dad. Hi, dad. Hi, dad."
yep. I love it. I love it. And see, but I think there's something really special in that, right? I think our children get to see us wearing different hats, and they get to see the integration, as I like to
Mm-hmm.
call it, between the things we love the most, we're the most passionate about, and the things that are the reason we do it, which is, of course, them. And so I think that's the beautiful thing. It's finding sometimes the scale is tipped real one way and sometimes it pivots back the other. It's really
Mm-hmm.
finding, the connection between your head and your heart, and what, is moving you, and thinking through how is it impacting you as well and your family.
Well, it's the value of work too, right? And because I think not a lot of kids, because parents' jobs can be so disconnected from their family, and a lot of times jobs are things that keep parents from their kids, right? So I think as well, it's helping kids to see the value in hard work and what that does, right? The connection between the work and the benefit, and also the income of the family. I think that's a very big part of it.
Yeah, and when you learn it young, it becomes a muscle that's already
Yes.
built. It's like it's already second nature to you. So when I grew up with that hustle culture, as I like to call it, but hustle culture can also swing the other direction to a place of unhealthy. But
Mm-hmm.
I've also had a mother figure that had me, you know slingshot back the other direction, right? And so I think learning how to do those things is the real key. And I think AI is helping a lot of us now get back some of those cycles on things that used to be a lot more difficult to do. And so
Mm-hmm.
finding the balance is really a word that I don't use, but it's juggle, it's integration, it's all those words.
Well, it's efficiency, right? It's, you mentioned AI, and I think a lot of people have this idea that AI is going to replace people. And I think in certain places, sure, it might. But for those of us that learn how to use it well, it's increasing efficiency, right? So, it's, work-life balance isn't really a thing, but efficiency is, right? If you could be more efficient, waste less time, and be more accurate with the time you're spending, well, then there's a lot more benefit from the time being spent.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. Jeremy, tell me anything that you want to leave with our listeners that we haven't touched on. Any more of your isms that you want to leave with them?
Well, I know one we haven't really touched on is the Roman Empire, and I spent a lot of my life on that. So I would say, as a business owner, kind of getting away from the history angle, I would say one thing to understand, and that's whether it's in your business, whether it's in history, or whether it's in life, is remembering that history and bad events don't repeat themselves, but they do rhyme in a lot of ways. So you have to kind of understand how to use the motion. If something is happening economically, how can you as a business owner do something about it to use that motion? I think that goes back to the theme we were talking about earlier about people that are extraordinary. Is they figure out how to use the motion. It might be good motion, it might be bad motion, but how can they use it for positive effect? So I think as a business owner, that is one of the number one muscles you can learn how to build, right? You get a flat tire on your car. Okay, great. Well, it's a terrible thing. You're going to change that tire and you're going to put it back on the car. But now, what did that teach you, and what can you use that to benefit you for, right? There's always a positive light in everything, and it can teach you a lesson, and it can help you to become better.
I love that analogy. That made me think back to my father only allowing me to drive a car when I learned how to change the tire. So that was the rule. I, I had to change the tire and the oil, and then I could get my driver's license. I
There you
thought it was
go.
bizarre, but I have used that tire analogy before when I had to actually change a tire once. So
There you go.
There's something to that. Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge. How can our listeners connect with you, learn more about what you do, and all the good things?
Well, we're all about people commanding their voice and also building an empire. So I put together a great resource for your audience called Command Your Empire. If they go to commandyourempire.com, they can grab that. It is everything they need to know for free on increasing their media footprint, getting out there, being more active, and getting their message out there. Because you really need to command your message in the world that we live in now, because you will get drowned out. So that's commandyourempire.com.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Jeremy. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with our listeners here today. That's the Executive Connect podcast.